Hey everyone, welcome back to ASM Track Tips. My name's Tomo Gorman from Tomo Coaching, and in this video we're talking about Utah Motorsports Campus, the old Miller Motorsports Park. We're talking about the perimeter circuit today. It's out just outside of Salt Lake City in Tooele, Utah. 3 miles long, about 14 corners, even though they don't number them here. And this track's a lot of fun. It's up in the mountains. It's pretty flat, covers a huge amount of space, but it's very high speed and flowing. And it's maybe uncommon to go there because it is a little bit isolated from most of the country, but it's a lot of fun if you get to go. So here we have our overhead map of Utah Motorsports Campus. We're doing the perimeter course for this episode at least, and a couple of general thoughts. The first one, as you can see, they don't do corner numbers here. There's actually a couple of extra layouts of road courses on the interior, and instead of renumbering them, they just name them. So you might get used to these corner number names rather than numbers if you're going here. Also, it is a very fast and flowy track, but in general, I think there's not a lot of nuance or surprises to the track. Your natural track instincts will generally work here as far as when you would think to late apex, when you would think to attack entries versus exits. It's all very standard type of approach at this track. So if in doubt, go with your instincts if you know kind of the track basics. So the front straightaway is incredibly long. We'll be driving down the right side of the track for forever, depending on how much horsepower you have. But we'll eventually get down towards Sunset Bed, which is the first corner, and we should have brake markers 4, 3, 2, and 1 down towards the corner here. And our turn-in point is going to be down towards where the curb on your right will pick up. Now this is going to be a very slow, gradual turn-in because this is a very late apex corner. But it is also an extremely long duration corner. So from turn-in, you have a really long time to bring the car down towards a fairly late apex. And the corner is actually also fairly on camber. So there's some banking that will help you work the car through the corner. Just make sure that you're paying attention to that relatively late apex, which will allow you to get on power fairly early to start working your way uphill through Dreamboat workouts and Scream. Now the run from Sunset Bed all the way up towards Scream is slightly uphill. So when I say there's not a lot of elevation here, it's not huge drops like Road Atlanta, but you are going uphill, which means you want a good run out of Sunset Bed. After your later apex, maybe 3/4 of the way through the corner, you be feeding power or powering past that apex to track yourself out to the right. But the straight between the next couple of corners, the straights between the next couple of corners are very short. So you're going to continue your trajectory off to the left, get the car over to the left side of the track as early as you can for Dreamboat. And just past the turn-in, or just past the curb on your left is going to be our turn-in point to bring the car down through the middle of Dreamboat. Now this is a very fast corner. You really shouldn't need to dissipate much speed coming towards it. So just a very light brake pressure or even just a lift to get the car to tuck in for the inside of the corner here is all you should need, unless you have a lot of power that you're coming out of Sunset Bed towards Dreamboat quickly. But again, turning in just past where the curb starts on your left, down to the middle of the corner for an apex and tracking all the way out to the left, where we're going to carry that angle back again over to the right for workout. So linking these first couple corners is continuing. We've got the car over to the right side of the track pretty early. And again, we want to get our braking done kind of just before the corner and let the car roll its speed into workout. We have some banking helping us through this corner again, just very mild, but our turn-in is going to be towards the end of the curb on our right and just kind of slowly bring the car down here. Now, if you'll notice in the video later, the surface color, you can kind of follow the line on this track with the rubber. So if in doubt about these turn-in points or anything, you should be able to more or less stay on the dark line that's developed around the track and kind of end up in the right spot. So having turned in towards the end of this curb down to a fairly central apex, we're going to carry a lot of speed out to the outside, just barely keeping the car on the track exiting workout. And now your temptation is going to be to kind of continue that arc towards the apex of Scream. But note how long this straightaway is between the two corners. You actually want to let the car breathe just for a second and then turn in again for this tiny little kink. Now the faster your car is, this will become a proper corner, and if you turn in too soon, you're going to run out of track real quick here on the exit. So again, just kind of let the car breathe for just a beat and then set the car down into the kink for Scream. A lower horsepower car, you can kind of do whatever you want through here and you'll be fine. Now we're working our way down this fairly long straightaway. You can see how important the exit is at workout because we have a very, very long run up towards the Black Rock hairpin, which is the slowest corner on the track. Maybe the hardest to read. You can see on the overhead map that it kind of opens up on the exit. It feels like a double apex corner in the car, but on the track map you can see that it's really an increasing radius corner that you typically don't need a double apex. But rewinding into the entry, we're gonna have brake markers on our right, 3, 2, and 1. And just towards the turn-in point, there's an extra car width of track that bumps out right here. You wanna make sure you use that. Any inch you can buy on the way into this corner to open the corner up is gonna be very beneficial for you. Now, having kind of counted the 3, 2, and 1 down into the corner for brake markers, pick your threshold braking point, get heavy on the brake, and then kind of where the 0 would be. If there was a 0 brake marker, is going to be our turn-in point, and we're going to bring the car down to a fairly central apex right here in the middle of the corner. Be very patient with the throttle. We have a little bit of banking to help us, and then we're going to pick up the throttle to power us out to the outside and kind of finish the corner off using as much momentum as we can forward to drive the car off the corner, but not worrying too much about cutting distance. You can really track the car out quite a bit to the outside here, and then slowly work your way back across to the left towards the right hook. So these next 2 corners on the map look like 2 separate corners, but in the car they drive very much like one. We have right hook and knockout, and right hook is really just there to trick you into turning in way too early for knockout. Right hook is essentially part of the braking zone for knockout, which is going to be a very late apex to lead us down this longer straightaway here in the middle of the lap. So having the car all the way on the left side of the track, the hardest part, other than to remember not to turn in for right hook, is that there are no brake markers here. It's going to be a very nebulous space that you have to use some muscle memory where to brake. And the only reference point that I've found helpful is where the curb picks up right about here on your left. You're going to have to time your braking point based on that curb. And I don't think most cars can get to the curb before they brake. So you're going to be braking before that curb, but just kind of judge your space on how much distance you have approaching that curb and use that as a braking point. Now, the decreasing radius nature of this corner means that we have to ask the car to multitask a little bit. So right as we get to this point where we've hit the brakes, we're also going to angle the car gently across the track and aim kind of towards the middle of this outside curb right here. And as we brake in a relatively straight line, maybe 90% brakes and 10% turning, as we get to that outside curb, towards the outside curb, is when you can start to pull your foot off the brake pedal and add steering to get down to a late apex for knockout. A very nice heavy brake early and then rolling off the brake pedal to relieve that brake pressure and let the car change direction to tuck in for a late apex. Now, the inside curb at knockout is a reasonably friendly curb. If you end up on top of it, it shouldn't upset the car too much, but we don't want to track out to the outside curbs on the exit on top of them because they're extremely rough. So if you climb the curb on the inside, it's okay, but you want to kind of keep the car on the track and really focus on getting a good run out of knockout because this entire straightaway here is very long. So now we've got a long straightaway where we're just kind of powering towards the next corner, Witchcraft. And there's a slight kink here and then a very, very fast right-hand sweep that leads uphill towards the end of it. And this corner is very, very fast. It's kind of a less is more kind of corner. So as you get into it, you want to be on the far left side of the track and just slowly lead the car across the track to the right side where we're going for a very, very late apex, right where the apex curbing ends on the inside of the track. It can bait you into turning too early, but if we end up on the left side of the track, you can see what that's about to do when we get into the attitudes. You'll be on the wrong side, and it's going to make a lot more work through this section than we need. So again, Witchcraft, kind of less is more, gradually bring the car across the track to the right, and we're going to have a nice straight approach into the attitudes. So now we have maybe the most fun section on Utah Motorsports Campus, which are the attitudes. We have the first attitude, the second attitude, and bad attitude is what they call them. So we have the car on the far right of the track right here. As soon as the wheel gets straight, for the most part, is when we want to brake for the attitude. So it's going to feel pretty early, but this is an uphill braking zone that goes away very quickly because Witchcraft is such a fast corner. As soon as the wheel gets straight, we're on the brakes, and the attitudes kind of drive like a slalom. So we want to kind of set up for a late apex on the first 2 so that we can power through the third. If you see what my angle just did there with my guide. Now, some of the nuance in the attitudes is going to be car dependent because you will be able to use the left side curb and the right side curb here in certain cars. The cars I've driven here are happy to take a little bit of the first, a lot of the second, and kind of straight line the second attitude. Other cars that I know of are a little happier to take a bunch of the third. So kind of play with these curbs, but know that you're able to use certain ones. Just kind of feel which one is going to be friendly for your car to use. On the entry for the attitudes, we want to turn in just where the curbing is ending on our right, and we're again tucking in for a late apex. We want to keep the weight transfer working to our advantage, so keep the car turning left and then cross your hands quickly, fast hands to get through the second attitude. This is where I think you can use quite a bit of curbing. And the further right you set up, the later apex you apex at the second attitude, the straighter bad attitude will be. So you should be able to pretty much power through the downhill portion of this third attitude and power onto the straightaway. If bad attitude feels like too much work, think about how you're attacking the first and second corners here, because it probably means you're not late apexing them enough. The last bit to take into consideration is we're falling downhill pretty aggressively into a compression through the apex of bad attitude. So even if the car feels like it maybe won't make the corner, the compression will add grip and allow you to really attack that exit. So now we're powering up the right side of the track. We'll have a 2 and a 1 brake marker coming into Tuella turn, which on the surface looks like a pretty straightforward corner, but ends up being very difficult to get right. Is a little slower than you want it to be honest. So as you get towards the corner, you'll turn in just past the 1, having gotten some braking done, and we're going to lead the car down to the apex curbing, which again, car dependent. Certain cars can climb that entire inside curb and be completely happy and compliant. Other cars, if they're maybe a bit stiffer or whatever the chassis setup is, can get kind of pogoed to the outside. So you can try this inside curb, but if it feels inconsistent or uncomfortable for your car, maybe better to just stay off of it. Kind of use the banking through the corner, and then we're going to pick up the power just past the apex to power us all the way out to the outside curbs here. Now, there's about 5 car widths of curb on our right on the exit here, but it is all ripple curbing and it is extremely uncomfortable to use. So in my experience, I would only use about a half a car width of it if you need to with the right side tires, but I definitely wouldn't plan on going all 4 tires onto that curbing. You're just going to get your teeth rattled out. Now that we've come out of Tuella turn, you can kind of just bring your eyes up to the 1 board that's way down here at Clubhouse Corner. It's a very long straightaway. It takes a while to cover this distance, but there are, for some reason, 4, 3, 2, 1 brake markers down towards this Clubhouse Corner. The turn-in point, again, is going to be just at or past the 1, and you can really attack Clubhouse Corner. It's a very fast corner. There's really no need to late apex or get it set up to the left for wind-up. So you really want to maximize your speed through and exiting this Clubhouse Corner, which means we can track all the way out to the right side on exit. There are curbs on the exit here that mean we can track all the way out. You can get the right sides even up on them a little bit if you want. And then whatever space you have left, having touched the curbs on exit here, you can work the car back towards the middle of the track to open up the entry of wind-up. But honestly, anywhere from the far right side of the track to the middle should be okay. No matter where the car ends up in this whole distance here, you can really kind of work with to get through wind-up. Now, wind-up is a very much skid pad style corner, which means we're just going to cut the distance out of it and keep the car as high a grip as it has through this corner. But there's a reason it's called wind-up and release. Wind-up really doesn't matter. It's only an opportunity to throw the lap away up onto the front straightaway. It's release that we want to get a good exit on. So again, just kind of cutting distance through the entire duration of wind-up. And my visual reference through here is I'm looking off to these bleachers on my far right, or even the pit entry road that comes off right about here. I want my eyes looking all the way over there, and as soon as I can kind of see that lane opening up is when I get on power. So I want my power to bring me this direction. If I get on power back towards the middle of the corner, it's going to bring me this direction, and all of a sudden I've kind of compromised my entry to release here. So be very patient in wind up. Make sure that you're setting up for the right corner, which is release. Having gotten the power down and a little bit of acceleration out of wind up, we want to have minimal back and forth down this short little straight. There's really no time to get from the left to the right, so you should be able to come out pretty far to the right, no back and forth, and then just bring the car back for a turn in at release. Now you're going to have to play a little bit with the turn in because there are no braking, or there's no turn in reference point here. It's just a big wide open space, but the goal is a late apex way down here at the exit of release. And while wind up was a flat terrain corner, there's quite a bit of camber through release, so we can turn from the high side down to that late apex and use that camber to our advantage. The only thing to keep in mind is as you turn in and the camber gains, a lot of cars tend to go a little bit loose. The back end will start to rotate around you as you turn in for release, and we definitely don't want to be chasing the car sliding through the entry of this corner. So try not to rush that weight transfer too much, and try not to attack the entry of release too much. Again, we have almost a mile straightaway to cover down this front straightaway. It's important to get a good exit. After we've got our turn in done and the car is nice and underneath us, we can just get back to maintenance power and start to feed past the apex, which will carry us all the way out to the outside, straight up to the curbs, and powering down this really long front straightaway to finish the lap. So now we're hopping on board to take a lap of Utah Motorsports Campus. This is going to be our trusty 2017 Civic Si race car. So we're on some good grippy race slicks, some race suspension and racing brakes, but no aero, and still a very modest 200 horsepower. So this is not a wildly fast car. And this will be a great way to appreciate how much space Utah Motorsports Campus covers. This place is absolutely huge. So coming up onto the front straightaway, again, this straightaway is massively long. Pit lane is on our right side, and we just get to start the lap off with a nice calm cruise down the right side of the straightaway here towards turn 1. So down towards the end of the straightaway, we have our brake markers coming up. There's the first one. We're going to turn in just past the curb that starts on our right, just there. Note how slowly I turn in, how gradually I work across the track before a late apex and tracking back out to the right, immediately carrying that trajectory off to the left before turning in for Dreamboat. This is a very fast corner. It was flat out in this car, actually, which carried me all the way to the left side before bringing the car back across the track. A quick dab of the brakes in a straight line before crossing in to Workout, which will carry me to the outside of the track. Now let the car go straight for just a moment and then kink through what they call screen. Now we have a little bit of an uphill run towards the Black Rock hairpin, and there's that extra car width of track. Move into that section and just past where the zero marker would be, down to the apex. Again, a central apex, and then look at how wide I've tracked out to maximize my acceleration. Now I get to gradually work my way across the track, braking just before where that curb started, and braking towards the outside curb and then tucking in for a very late apex at Knockout. Don't let the right hook apex kind of trick you. Now we have another long run up towards Witchcraft. You always have a lot of time to think about what comes up next here at Utah, but turning in from the left side of the track for a late apex, very fast corner, but as soon as I get the wheel straight, we're braking hard on the brakes and turning in just past where that curb ends, using a little bit of curb on the left, then a bunch of curb on the right, and powering through this compression at the bottom through Bad Attitude. Now up towards the Tuella turn, we have our 2 brake markers, braking and turning in just past the one board down to the apex curb. This car did not like a lot of curb at the apex there. Then tracking out, trying not to use too much on the exit towards the clubhouse corner now. Turning in again just past the 1, flowing my speed through, just kissing the apex and tracking all the way out to the right. Now I had enough time to get about mid-track here, but I'm turning in early and cutting the distance out of windup. Note how late I get on throttle. I'm keeping all the way to the right and then leading the car down into release for a late apex. I'm already picking up the power, flat out now up onto the front straightaway to complete the lap at Utah Motorsports Campus. So those are my tips for the perimeter circuit out here at Utah Motorsports Campus, which brings us to our track scores. First up, we have our fun factor. It's going to be a 6 for me. Super fast and flowy, but it's maybe not got the most personality in some places. So once you kind of get into the routine, I think it just kind of settles into a medium fun track, which gives it a 6. Next up, we have our risk factor, and I'm going to give it a 3 for risk factor. The most likely thing you are to do if you go off this track is get really dirty and dusty because it's out in the desert, but other than that, it's pretty safe. You may get some paint chips, rock chips in your windshield, something like that, but in general, you're just going to go for a big long ride. And lastly, we have our technicality, and I'm going to give it a 6 for that as well. And I think most of the technicality for this track comes from linking corners together, specifically out here at the Attitudes and in the last couple corners. There is absolutely some give and take in certain places on this track that adds some technicality. But once you kind of get where to give it up to make sure that you can attack in other places, it's a pretty straightforward lap. So my overall score for Utah Motorsports Campus is going to be a 5. Kind of settles right in the middle to the grand scheme of racetracks. It's not super fun. It's not the worst. It's just a good place to go lap, and you can certainly learn a lot here too. So I think it's an absolutely great school track, learning track, lapping day track. Races pretty well. Give it a 5. So that does it for Utah Motorsports Campus. We do offer driver coaching packages from remote coaching all the way up to trackside private coaching here at ASM and Tomo Coaching. So get a hold of us on our website if you're interested in that. But otherwise, I hope you found that video helpful, and thanks for watching.